Hey guys, Pankaj Raval back again, and today I'm talking about commercial lease agreements. It's something that comes up a lot for us, and we love to help clients with these because they're really important to the success of any business, and there's about 8 specific dangers you really want to look out for before you launch into a commercial lease agreement. So, without further ado, we're talking about commercial leases today. Make sure you're paying attention because this information could save you thousands of dollars. Here we go. Now, there's about 8 potential dangers when you're negotiating a commercial lease, all right? There's several different areas of a lease you want to look at, but the 8 most important areas you want to look at are not allocating enough time. That's the first one. All right. You want to make sure you have enough time to go through the lease, to do to handle the TIs, to handle the improvements, to review the property, make sure it makes sense, look at the get the financing if necessary, making sure you have enough time to deal with the lease agreement, but also the improvements to the property. Second is insufficient planning. You want to make sure that you're planning well for what you're going to be doing with this property. Oftentimes people find locations and they're saying, oh, we gotta snap it up, and they jump into it without planning on what they need it for, what are the issues they need to address, what do they need to bring up to the landlord. There's a whole process to this, and we highly recommend you look at it from the very beginning and give yourself enough time and also plan correctly for how you're going to utilize the property and also what's going to happen later. Contingencies if things don't work out for some reason. Third, we're talking about lack of representation, and that's where we're here. We are representation. You could also have advisors, you have coaches. There's a variety of people who could be advising you on these leases. Brokers are great people to help advise you. They're in your corner helping you make the right decision. So make sure you have the right representation. Ideally, it's a team, especially if there's a lot of money involved in this lease. You want to make sure that you have the right representation. You have people guiding you and looking at all the potential issues that could come up. For example, inspections. You want to make sure you have inspections done. Oftentimes you have issues with plumbing or roofing, and if you don't address it ahead of time, you could now be fighting with the landlord to fix it later on. The fourth issue that a lot of clients run into is failing to inspect the property. Again, we just talked about it as an area to address. Very important. Inspections will save you lots of time and money. And if you worry about it coming out of your pocket, oftentimes if the lease term is long enough, if the landlord is motivated enough to get you in that property, they will oftentimes pay for it or split the cost with you, because even if they pay for it and you don't work out, they can still use that inspection with another tenant. So it's probably better off that you can convince them. Most of the time they'll be open to it, to do the inspection, so you go into that property with peace of mind. The fifth thing to consider is making sure you have enough time to negotiate the lease. Now, this is critical. It's related to time in general, but make sure you have time to negotiate. It's the worst for us as lawyers to get a lease last second, and this happens all the time. You maybe have done it. Say, hey, can you just look this over? There's not much I can do at the 11th hour. If you want me to look over a lease, I can do a great summary of it. I can tell you all the issues involved. But if we have no negotiating leverage, if you have to get in there and you've already been negotiating this with the landlord for 2 months, there's not much we can do as lawyers at the end of the day, at the last minute, except maybe tell you, oh, don't even think about it because this is a bad deal and this is a bad lease. So if you want to be able to negotiate the lease, if you want to be able to negotiate the terms, have it back and forth, get us involved early. We want to be able to be involved in your LOI process, their team term sheets, and also then going to the full agreement where we need to negotiate specific terms. And remember, everything is negotiable. No matter what anyone tells you, no matter what landlords say, everything is negotiable. And it's better to ask, better to address some of the terms that are concerning than just let them slide, because in the worst case scenario, now you may be in an inferior position and facing potential legal exposure. The sixth thing to think about is the specific terms. Now, it really depends on the type of lease, but for example, you have a triple net lease, you have a gross lease. There's a lot of different leases out there, but there's key terms that usually we look at and focus on as lawyers. That is rent. How much is rent? What's the base rent, and what other additional rent is being charged? Is there a additional? Usually if it's a triple net, they'll be asking for a portion of the operating expenses and taxes, and you're gonna have to cover all that. You need to know what that is. You need to know what you're getting into before you sign that lease. So ask for that information up front. Get examples, get historical data on the property to know what you're looking at in terms of how much they're charging. Landlords are very good at sneaking in as many costs as possible in these operating expenses, and now you're responsible for paying everything on these properties. The other point to consider is commencement. When does the lease term commence? Is there a fixed date, or is it related to when the TIs are completed? What does completion of TIs even mean? It can often be ambiguous what completion means, and oftentimes these leases are written in a way to protect the landlord. So you want to be really specific. What does completion mean? Who determines when a property is complete and when you have to move in? Because you could be stuck moving into a property that's partially completed and now you can't even use it for your desired business. You also need to get permits and other things for the business. Remember, that takes time. So you want to give yourself ample time before you actually have to start paying. Buy yourself as much time as possible, also called free rent. How do you negotiate those terms? You need to look at those early on and try to get as much time to get in the property, get up and running, and ideally start generating revenue before you have to start making large lease payments. Number 7 is, how do the lease terms affect your business? What are the relocation rights of the landlord if they need to relocate you? What are your rights to getting adjacent space? These are all important issues to address, and how they affect your business is critical. For example, adjacent space, let's say you're expanding. Is there a right of first offer there, or a right of first refusal to get adjacent space? And what if you can't get more space in the building? Can you break your lease? Those are important terms that are not always included automatically in a lease. Oftentimes they're not, and you have to have someone knowledgeable at those terms put them in so they can protect you in the event that you are growing and now you need to find new space. These are just a few of the terms that you want to consider. There's many more terms out there. The final thing I want to discuss is, don't underestimate your negotiating leverage, okay? Everyone has negotiating leverage no matter what. Like I said, everything is negotiable. You've got to be able to ask and be willing to ask for certain terms like free rent, discounted rent. You want to be able to get as many concessions as possible at the end of this lease negotiation. Don't be shy in asking. That's what we are very good at as lawyers. We ask all the time, and the worst thing that anyone can say is no, sorry, we can't do that. Almost never will you have anyone just walk away from the deal because you asked for something. Hey, you asked for it and they can say no. Landlords are used to it, especially bigger landlords. They know people ask for the things all the time. People ask for ridiculous things. So I think you should ask for what you want. Be creative. Don't be confined by what you think is reasonable. Ask for what you think you deserve with your business, and make sure that you are putting that in writing and presenting it to the landlord. Oftentimes the negotiating tactic we use is to ask for 20 things knowing that you'll probably only get 7 or 8. So ask for much more, and we'll probably get a few things that we really care about, and then some things we just throw away. These are just tricks of the trade when we're negotiating. If you're in real estate, you probably know them as well, but it's important to remember that you won't always want to ask for more and expect to probably get a little less, but ideally at the end of the day, that'll be called a compromise, and you'll be much better off than not negotiating at all. So these are 8 areas of leases you really want to pay attention to. They are kind of danger zones that a lot of people don't pay attention to enough, and it can get them in really difficult situations or just undermine their ability to get a great deal on a property. My name is Pankaj Raval with Carbon Law Group. Hopefully this was helpful. Can't wait to hear from you.